Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
That's right, streaming live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find the audio-only live stream, as well as, of course, links to our social media sites where we broadcast and simulcast every morning on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. You'll find links to our podcasts. If you've missed any of the podcasts, you can go back there and listen. We upload it every day and more. And, of course, broadcasting live across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. Now, housekeeping real quick. I got another email yesterday, speaking of podcasts, about the podcast. Somebody said, hey, are you going to upload the podcast? I haven't seen a podcast in a week. And apparently it turns out that it looks like iTunes or Apple Podcasts or something has got some kind of problem updating the podcast as they're coming in. I don't know exactly what's going on. I've got to reach out to Apple later today to figure it out. But meanwhile, if you are listening on Spotify or CastBox or Stitcher or Google Play or a ton of other apps that are available to you, those podcasts are uploading properly. So you could try a different podcasting app, or you can go straight to my website, as I said, and you can play them directly off the website. Under the podcast link, you can find them all right there. But if you have an iPhone and are listening through iTunes or Apple Podcasts, apparently it's not it's not updating correctly. So we'll see what happened. I sent an email to Apple yesterday, and we'll see if there's any response on that this week. Fingers crossed. I mean, I'm not 100% confident, but we'll see what happens from here. All right. Well, good morning. And how are you, my friends? I hope you are ready for today. It is Tuesday, and we have got a lot of stuff to talk about, both some headlines, which we're going to get into here in just a moment. And then we are going to be diving into it with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Brad Keithley will be joining us, and we'll be chatting with him about the weekly top three, which topics include this morning. We're going to be talking about the new base student allocation call. They're already pushing for it. They're pushing for a new base student allocation increase. A new bill that the governor had vetoed that Brad says would have helped the PFD. He and I are going to disagree on this one, which is interesting. We'll see what happens there. And then finally, the interim choice for Department of Revenue Commissioner, and how Brad says that in his mind, this is an uninspired choice. So we'll be talking about those things with Brad Keithley this morning. Again, ak4sb.com is his website, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, or you can follow him on Twitter or on Facebook or wherever and get all the info that you need on that this morning. Then in hour two, we may take a phone call or two, and we're still working on getting our Alaska phone number working again. Still having some, apparently there's some, I don't know, there's a shortage of hardware or something. They're having a hard time getting the number ported back over where it's supposed to be. But the phone lines are still up and running, and so we'll be taking some phone calls probably in the beginning of hour 2, and then we will dive into it with Chris Story, the man from Homer, who comes in every week for a life coaching lesson. And this week he also said that he would give us a little bit of a political update. He said we'd talk a little bit about post-election stuff. And so I imagine we're going to have him on for 2 segments this morning. The first one will probably, historically, we've done it this way, that we talk about the dirty, dirty stuff, the politics and everything else in the first segment. And then he lifts us back, because it would really be counterproductive to give us the uplift segment and then, fill our heads full of ugly political stuff in the second segment. So I'm assuming that is the direction that we are going to be going this morning. So there you go. That's the full rundown. Coming up in tomorrow's program, Justin Ruffridge is going to be joining us in hour 1. Mike Schauer is supposed to be with us in hour 2. On Thursday, Roger Holland. And I have forgotten who the next, but this is a full week. And then next week, we've got Les Guerra, we've got Louis Flora, we've got, I believe we're also going to have Stephen Wright and possibly Jessica Wright on next week as well. So there you go. Lot of stuff happening. And we're going to be busy for the next 7 weeks or so as we drive on into the general election, which is coming up. All right. Headlines. Who's got your headlines? That would be me. We've got some headlines here to discuss this morning, including some new news on the general election front. Must-Read Alaska is announcing that, actually, and KTUU, I guess both of them are announcing, that candidate Buzz Kelly, who came into the final 4 of the final Republican candidates, or final candidates rather, for the Senate election, the U.S. Senate election, has decided to suspend his campaign. He was on a radio show yesterday and announced that he has decided that he is going to pull the campaign. He said, "I'm suspending the campaign, and I'm asking all those who supported me or my ideas if you would now please throw your support behind Kelly Tshibaka. She is our best bet to deny Murkowski." For her part, Tshibaka said, "I'm grateful and honored to have Buzz Kelly's support and agree with his conclusion that presenting a unified front gives us the best opportunity to beat Lisa Murkowski. With both Buzz Kelly's support and the endorsement of former Democratic candidate Edgar Blanchford as well, it's clear that Alaskans from across the spectrum are uniting behind our campaign." And that was Edgar Blanchard, who was a Democratic candidate in the Senate primary, endorsed Tshibaka last week. And so there's some movement there. There's some good stuff. Is it enough to overcome? Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed on that one. Interestingly enough, the elections may be a little different than what we had decided coming out of the primary, as the Alaska Division of Elections has now been ordered by a local judge to review and enforce the state's the Constitution's disloyalty clause when determining candidate David Eastman's eligibility for office. He had his eligibility challenged to serve in the legislature based on his lifetime membership of the group Oath Keepers, which the ADN titles as a far-right militia group. The ongoing lawsuit was filed by former Mat-Su Assembly member Randall Kowalski and seeks to resolve the eligibility question. Now, this disloyalty clause, which has not been tested in courts, bars a person from holding public office who belongs to an organization that advocates for the overthrow of the U.S. or state government. The Oath Keepers' leaders and close affiliates have been charged in the January 6th attack on the Capitol. The division, for their own part, argued that they didn't have the ability or the capability to investigate the disloyalty clause question, and that it can only look at simple public records, whether the candidate is of the right age and whether they reside in the right place. Eastman was approved in June to run for re-election. But the judge, Jack McKenna, noted that the division, while it does not have subpoena powers, he said it is a statutorily required component to determine eligibility based on the Alaska Constitution's provisions, including the disloyalty clause. He disagreed with the argument by state attorneys that making an eligibility determination on that clause could cause impartiality. Eastman's attorney, Joe Miller, appeared in court arguing that a bureaucratic agency should not have the ability to unilaterally deny a candidate from running for office. He said McKenna's order dramatically expands the agency's role in determining who can and who cannot run for office based upon inherently subjective and very political criteria. To which that I would agree. Now, we've talked about this on the program in the past. I followed Oath Keepers, probably a dozen years ago. They had some people who wrote on they had a website and they had some writers in there. I think David Codrio wrote for them at one point, and they had some very good ideas back in the day. Now, again, this was 10, 12 years ago, and slowly but surely I stopped following their pages or whatever it was, and I haven't really been paying attention. But if for somebody who joins an organization for life, like, for example, how many of you are lifetime members of the NRA, and how many years ago did you buy that NRA lifetime membership, and how far has the NRA come from now to then, or from then to now, with things that you don't agree with? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, an organization can change. And just because you were a lifetime member 12 years ago, or purchase a lifetime membership based on one thing, doesn't mean that it's exactly the same thing today. This is a very troubling trend, because not only, organizations can change, and people can change, right? I mean, you can make it, you can grow, you can change your opinions, you can do whatever, and you may not be the same person 10, 12 years ago that you are today, or organizations, or vice versa. So I look at this, and now, again, there's never been any proof that Eastman had anything to do with any of the January 6th stuff. None of this stuff. This is all just guilt by association, essentially. And I find that problematic, that, you could support an organization in the past, and all of a sudden, you can be hanged with it because somebody, dug it up or whatever, or somebody in that organization does something wrong. I mean, look at the whole scandal in New York. I mean, we keep coming back to the NRA, but it's the biggest organization that I can think of that may be facing some of these issues. Look at the scandal in New York over the NRA and whether or not they were going to try and dismember it and everything else. I mean, and of course, all the actions that the NRA has been accused of. The rank and file members and life members that I know have all said, this is some BS, crazy stuff. What's going on in our organization? But because of their life, should they be then held accountable as lifetime members for the actions of the boards or for other members? I mean, it just makes no sense. I mean, I don't agree with David Eastman's tactics on a lot of things. I mean, I agree on a lot of his principles and his ideas as far as the destination. I just don't like the way he gets there a lot of the time. But I don't think anybody should be disbarred from office because they signed up for an organization 10, 12, 5 years ago. I don't believe that that's the right thing to do. But I guess that's just me. That's just me. Have you now, or have you ever been a member of a communist labor organization? Yeah, this is very much reminds me of the McCarthy kind of thing. Thank you for that, Brian. All right, we're coming up on the break. We're going to jump into this. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is going to be joining us here in just a hot second. I still got some other headlines, including this. Are you seeing these continuous hit pieces right now on Charlie Pierce. It's problematic, to say the least. And of course, it doesn't help that it doesn't appear that Charlie is really responding to any of these things. I don't know how you would respond, but I'd like to see something. It's going to be a tough situation, but we're going to get into that here in just a moment. Let's take a break. And when we come back, Brad Keithley will be joining us. And let's get ready to rumble. We're going to have a showdown. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We'll return with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. He's up next right here.
Our light, our guide, and our trusted friend. Michael Duke Show.
Okay, we're in the break right now, ready to go. All right, going back up here. See what you guys are saying about everything. Somebody said there was no Facebook. Facebook's up and running. There's a bunch of people on Facebook. But then Sandy said had a hard time getting on the show this morning. Well, they're trying to hide the truth. Sorry. Let's see. Kelly Shabak was in Ketchikan. We had a very nice meeting yesterday. Hey, it's raining again. Big surprise. Big surprise. Soon they will put the Alaska Independence Party and Libertarians on the list, said Daniel. Only approved party members of approved parties will be allowed to rule. Yeah. Let's see. I thought this was covered under the First Amendment freedom of association. I would, yeah. I mean, again, it's been 10 or 12 years, but I don't ever remember the Oath Keepers talking about any kind of overthrow of anything. In fact, their whole name was that they wanted to uphold their oaths to the Constitution, that they were military men and police officers and average everyday folks who wanted to that was why they called them Oath Keepers. They wanted to uphold their oath to the Constitution. So, I mean, it's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy stuff. All right. Good morning. Only 29 people here. Where is everybody? No notification on Facebook, said Greg. I don't know what's going on. It wasn't coming up in YouTube either. Had to go search for it both on YouTube and Facebook. What's up with that? Again, can't stop the signal. All right. Brad Keithley. Alaskans for Sustainable. Brad, they're trying to do it to me. They're trying to get me. That's what's going on.
Can't stop the signal. I like that. Pirate radio station.
That's right. You can't stop the signal. Well, that's a nerd reference from the movie Serenity for Firefly. So that was the thing. Can't stop the signal. But it's the same idea. We're going to be there. It's going to be what's going on. How are you doing this morning? You ready to go?
I'm doing great. Should I have my boxing trunks on or something?
Yeah, you and I are going to have a fight here in a minute. I'm going to tell you right now. We're gonna
great radio. Way to go, Michael.
I know. Hey, I'm here to do it. We're only here to educate, entertain, and enlighten. So that's what it's all about. If you're ready, I'm ready. We're going to jump into this here in a hot second, okay?
Yep, I'm ready.
All right. You sound good. I sound good. I sound good. We're going to be getting into this here and doing it to it. So just hold the line there for a hot second. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is going to be in the room here in just a minute. We're going to kick things off. Meanwhile, do me a favor. First of all, can I say thank you? Because there was a bunch of you that followed and did what I asked. You went out to Twitch, and right now I got 55 top followers on Twitch because you guys stepped up to the plate, and I can't tell you how grateful I am to those of you who did that, because, I mean, you got to make another account and everything else and all that. Now, could I ask you to do the same thing on YouTube? I mean, most of you probably already have a YouTube account. You don't even have to create a new Twitch account. You just you've got it. It's right there. All you got to do is hit the little subscribe button and ring the bell. And you can get it out there. And yes, Sandy says, well, now I've got the Twitch app. I have a third choice. Absolutely. Chris is over there right now. He says, I'm sure David could win an appeal about 6 years after the next term of service ends, says Chris over on Twitch. So Chris is watching us on Twitch. Thank you for the comment, Chris. But it's a great opportunity. So if you haven't gone over to YouTube and liked and followed over there, just like the ladies that were having a hard time, listening and finding the show this morning, the more options you have, the more likelihood of being notified. So go over there and get it done. So there you go. All right. Like, share, follow. Brad Keithley up next. Let's do it. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. All right, the weekly top three is where we dive into three issues that are usually important. It's what Brad Keithley, founder and director of Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, feel are important, and we bring him on this morning to discuss. And today is no different. We start things off, and today Brad and I are going to throw down because we totally disagree on something. But I can't wait to get into that. But Brad probably already knows what I'm talking about. So let's get into it, Brad. The weekly top three. Number one. You've already heard it. The weeping, the wailing, the gnashing of teeth, the rending of clothing. It's for the children. We have a $68 million deficit. We've got a $550 million budget for less than over 100,000 kids. And we just don't know what to do because we don't have enough money. The Anchorage School District is out there on a plea campaign to try and get somebody to give them some more money. And you're saying that any increase to the base student allocation, which is what they're talking about, is going to cost, and who's going to pay?
Yeah, exactly right, Michael. And I think the Anchorage School District announcement that they're facing a $60 million revenue shortfall budget deficit next year is going to add fuel to the fire. We've already seen some op-eds showing up. We've already seen candidates talking about it. I think this is going to be, frankly, one big difference that whether you elect a coalition or not is going to make. If you elect a coalition in the House and in the Senate, I think you're going to see a big push for BSA increases. You may even see it if the Republicans win, because it's going to be a for the children type campaign. We've seen even Republicans respond to that in past periods. So I think the BSA is going to be high on the agenda. BSA increase, base student allocation increase, is going to be high on the agenda coming in to the next legislature. The issue that I hope we focus on as that hits is not only do we need the increase, but if we're going to have an increase, who pays? The way we have set up government now, it's going to be middle and lower income Alaska families. If we continue to do what we've done in the past, it's going to be middle and lower income Alaska families through additional PFD cuts. To me, this is a clear example of why we need to focus on the who pays issue, because that's unfair. That is horribly regressive and horribly misplaced and horribly misallocated to push the costs of any BSA increase on to middle and lower income, only on the middle and lower income Alaska families. I think the who pays issue, if we focus on the who pays issue and say, look, if the BSA is increased, all Alaska families have to contribute to it in some sort of proportional manner. If the BSA, I think that is important to push that issue, because that could engage the top 20% finally in pushing back on increased spending. If if the top 20% who's been apathetic about spending issues, they'll give lip service to the need to cut spending, but they won't give the votes and they won't give the lobbyists the effort to try to cut spending. If they think they're going to face part of this increase, if they think that we're going to spread the costs equitably across all Alaska families and engage the top 20%, I think we're going to see, we are more likely to see the top 20% pushing back on spending, and I think that would make a difference in the legislature. So big issue coming up. I think the real issue behind it's going to be who pays.
I mean, I agree with that, but I think you've hit the nail on the head, really, of the fundamental issue is that if we should increase the BSA. I mean, the BSA, a lot of that money is being sucked up by administrative and overhead and everything else. We talked yesterday or day before, what do we get? Like 40% of every dollar ends up in the classroom. For the university, it's 17 cents on every dollar. I mean, we're looking at the consumption of all this funding is actually being picked up and sucked up by the overhead, which to me would mean that the administrations are the ones that need to look inside their own houses, not in the classroom, but inside their own houses to do it. I mean, I understand what you're saying is that that's the argument that we need to make when it actually hits the floor. But the bigger question, I think, is should we be increasing the BSA of $550 for, whatever it is, 100,000 students? I don't even think it's that high, but that's a lot.
Michael, I think they go hand in hand, and the reason is you and I can talk about the things that we can do to avoid a BSA increase. Charlie Pierce wrote a good op-ed a few weeks ago on the overhead issue and on the administration issue, that how much is spent on administration, and I think that's a good issue to push. But you and me, middle and lower income Alaska families, have not been able to push back on spending and reduce spending by a material amount. We saw that in 2019. We saw it in 2020. We've seen it in every legislative session since Dunleavy's been governor. We can talk about it a lot. We can push back on it. But without the top 20% engaged on these issues, we're not making progress in pushing back on spending. I think if we talk about both whether we need an increase and if we're going to have an increase, who pays for that increase at the same time, and push hard that if there is an increase, the costs have got to be spread equitably. I think there's a chance we engage the top 20% and in pushing back on the spending. If we wait until the BSA increase is already done, then start talking about who pays, I think it's too late. I think the top 20% will say, let's just keep going down the road we've been going down. So to me, it's important to talk about these two issues directly at the same time to get the top 20% engaged in pushing back on spending.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is our guest. So how do we frame it, Brad, in your mind? I mean, what is the best way to frame this argument if we have to? I mean, basically, essentially, we're fighting two battles: the if we should increase it, and then the who pays if we should increase it. So how should we be framing this if we're talking to our elected representatives in your mind?
In that way, Michael, as two issues. Should we increase it? The answer is no. But if we do increase it, and we need to face the fact that we may have coalitions in both the House and the Senate, which would virtually ensure that there will be an increase. If we increase it, then the cost of that increase, the cost of education generally, but the cost of that increase certainly need to be spread equitably. We need to stop this trend of just pushing the costs off on middle and lower income Alaska families. They need to be spread equitably across all Alaska families through some sort of tax. So I think you frame the issue as two issues at once. Do we need it? No. But if we have it, then the costs need to be spread equitably. And I think that second issue triggers the top 20% to start pushing back on the costs. I mean, we've seen Natasha, we've seen Stevens, we've seen all of the top 20% Republicans, Thompson in the House, LeBon in the House. We've seen them be very apathetic about spending. I mean, they've bent over backwards. Oh, it's for the children, so we need to do that. I think we're going to continue to see them be that way until they and their constituents have to face the music with respect to the costs as well.
One of the arguments that I've seen in the past, and Charlie makes in the chat room right now, is How about linking spending to performance? That's something that we've been calling for a long time. I mean, we continue to spend ever increasing amounts of money, and yet we're still in the bottom 48th, 49th, 50th, of 50 states. I mean, is there any chance of that in your mind?
Oh, great argument. Push the argument. But once again, you and me and the remainder of middle and lower income Alaska families making the argument haven't been enough to push back on spending in the past. We need to engage the top 20% in that argument as well. We need to make them part of the issue. They need to feel part of the exposure, part of the risk of having to pay for this if the legislature approves it. And then we need them to start talking about things like administrative overhead. We need them to talk about things like linking it to spending or linking it to lower 48 standards. We can talk about that all day long. You and I have long since figured out how we can cut government spending down to traditional revenue levels, but we haven't achieved it because it's just been you, me, and middle and lower income Alaska families talking about it. We need to engage the top 20% in this conversation as well. We need their resources, their connections with legislators that they've derived through donations and contributions and other things. They're lobbyists to be concerned about it and to push back on it also.
We've seen a lot of reasoning behind this, for the children, et cetera, et cetera. But really what it seems to be for the teachers unions, in fact, and for the bureaucracies, because we see things like this comment in the ADN article from Corey Aist, who's the president of the AEA, the Anchorage Education Association. He says, these issues create unnecessary stress. He says this story isn't really necessary. What is a district going to cut and how are they going to cut that? The question is, why are they being forced to go through that process? Basically, they should have unlimited funds. There shouldn't be unnecessary stress. I mean, like the rest of the world and businesses and people have to deal with every day, that stress of having to live within their means.
Yep. And guess what? Zach Fields and other Democrats say, yeah, we need to do that. And we need to take it out of PFD cuts, or we need to take it through PFD cuts because, the PFD is free money and it really belongs to all Alaskans and we ought to be spending it for things we need it for, including for the children. They know, the Democrats know that if the top 20% are engaged, they're going to be in trouble in being able to push these spending increases. They know if the top 20% have to pay for part of spending, that there's going to be a significant amount of pushback on that spending. So you're not only going to see Democrats and the unions, and Zach Fields is the poster child for this. You're not only going to see Democrats and the unions say, we need to do it for the children. We just need to do it out of permanent fund earnings, which is sort of the euphemism for PFD cuts. We need to do it out of permanent fund earnings because after all, it's free money. And we get to decide where it goes. So again, I mean, they're also signaling that they're concerned about the top 20% being engaged. They know that if the top 20% is engaged, that their spending patterns are going to be in trouble.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We're coming up on the break. Brad, you say up next, the governor has vetoed a bill that would help the PFD. Them's fighting words in my mind. Let's talk about that. Give me a quick tease here.
Well, the governor vetoed a bill that would have established a tax on e-cigarettes. And I know I'm leading with my chin when I start talking about a tax on vaping products with you. But the legislature passed by broad majorities. And we're going to talk about those majorities. By broad majorities, cute, very cute. By broad majorities in both the House and the Senate. In fact, the Senate twice passed by broad majorities a relatively small tax that would have increased revenues, would have reduced the dependence on the PFD for paying for government. And the governor vetoed it because he said he's just not going to agree to any tax. So I think that's a mistake. I think it results in additional pressure on the PFD, additional pressure on PFD cuts, and I'll explain why after the break.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We're going to be back with more here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. It is your home for common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more right after these messages.
If you missed the show, you can listen to it on your time with Dukes On Demand. Oh, and it's free. Like America used to be. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay, Brad Keithley is our guest here in the. Wait a second, I had you turned down. What was that, Brad?
That was great theater, Michael. That was great theater to blow smoke in my face while I'm talking about that.
You talk about that. I'm going to talk about that. But I have a method to my madness. It's not just because I myself use electronic cigarette products. It's because, we'll get into it here in just a second. But I want to go back, into the chat room here and see lots of comments this morning about, I guess, Facebook just reinstalled itself on Sandy's phone while she was in the middle of watching the show. And a lot of people said they didn't get notifications on one or the other. And to that, I say, this is why you should like me on all three platforms. This is why you should like me on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube and follow me on Twitch, because of all, you'll find one of them, I'll be there somewhere. That was the whole point of this whole madness. The reason we started multicasting is because Facebook was so, I don't know, not inadequate, but I guess unreliable as far as notifying the listeners and everything else. Somebody said that they had to find me, and it was very hard to find me this morning on the show. I didn't get a link today, and it's not easy to search for the show either, said Robert. So yeah, this is again just another reason why we should be following and subscribing and ringing the bells on both YouTube and on Twitch as well as Facebook, because that's what's going on. Let me just go back over here and see what else. I think Charlie's comment, which I keep wanting to come back to, how about linking spending to performance? I mean, as ideal as that would be, that's never going to happen, because they don't want to have their monies tied to performance, because then they would have to perform. They'd have to actually have an outcome that was viable. They would have to actually compete in the marketplace of ideas. And that's not something that they're down with, Brad.
No, they don't want to do that. And they don't want to take any actions. I mean, it's not just that. They don't want to take any actions that result in constraining spending. I mean, they're not only going to push for an increase in the BSA, they're going to push for a defined benefit plan for teachers, because, we got a shortage of teachers up here. And God, by the end of it, we may be pushing for a defined benefit plan for bus drivers, because we got a bus driver shortage. We're gonna face a tremendous amount of pressure for the children. You and I and listeners in the chat room are going to be able to come up with all sorts of reasons and all sorts of approaches for how to reduce spending or how to limit spending. But let me say this again: you and I and other middle and lower income Alaska families have not been able to push back on spending since 2019, since when this governor got installed and tried to cut spending back to traditional levels. All the ideas we come up with, all of the rationalizations for keeping spending down, they're all great. They all work. They all would work. But there's not the political will to do it. And why is there not the political will? Because the top 20% aren't engaged in the effort. They will give it lip service. They'll say, yeah, we need to cut spending a little bit here and there. But ultimately, when it comes to for the children, that they'll be votes. I mean, Steve Thompson, Bart LeBon, Natasha von Imhoff, Gary Stevens, you can just go down the list. They'll be votes for the children, for increasing spending, for pushing back on spending cuts. So we have to get all Alaska families, particularly the top 20%, particularly the donor class, engaged in the effort. If we don't, we're going to come up with a bunch of ideas. We're going to run ourselves ragged talking about them, but we're not going to achieve political success.
And you and I agree on that. I mean, that's been part of our reasoning for this whole time, is that until they get engaged, until they start to feel it in the pocketbook as everybody else does, there's never going to be any appetite. And especially since many of them are connected in some way, shape, or form to the crony class, which is the crony capitalist class of businesses that are basically built their entire business model on government contracts and living on government funds. And that's part of our problem right now.
I mean, the Democrats have figured out that they can increase spending as long as they push it to middle and lower income Alaska families. They don't care. They don't care about the economic impact on lower and middle income Alaska families. They figured out they can increase spending as long as they push it down there, as long as they keep the top 20% apathetic. And as long as we keep going down that road, you and I are going to talk ourselves blue in the face about the various ways in which we can cut spending and keep it down. But we're not going to be successful because the Democrats and the moderate Republicans are going to keep end running it by just continuing to take money out of the PFD.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, is our guest. You can find him at ak4sb.com and, of course, on Facebook and on Twitter and all over the place. But it's probably better to follow him on Facebook and Twitter because he gets real active out there. We're coming up on the break, and we're about to jump back into it. Please like and share this video on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitch. You can like it and share it from all of those places. And make sure you subscribe and ring the bell and then follow on YouTube and on Twitch. Let's get back into it. Here we go. All right, continuing now. Brad Keithley, our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, the weekly top three. Brad, your next discussion and talking point was about a bill that the governor vetoes. The Alaska Beacon has the article, Alaska governor vetoes bill to tax e-cigarettes and raise minimum age of tobacco. All right, I'll have your take on this first before I lose my mind.
Well, here's the deal, Michael. We're in an era of a leftover PFD. The legislature, von Imhoff has been clear about it. Others less so, but it's clear we're in the age of a leftover PFD. And what's the leftover PFD? The PFD cut, or the level of the PFD cut, is what's necessary to balance the budget after spending reduced by other revenues. That's what the PFD is. It's the leftover PFD. Here we had a bill. It's not the world's biggest bill. It's about $1,200,000. So it's not gonna really do a lot to anything in terms of money. But here we had a bill that the legislature finally passed that would have increased revenues, and by increasing revenues, it would have increased the amount of the leftover PFD. It passed. This is a tax bill. You know, everybody says we can't pass tax bills. It's a bill that passed the Senate the first time, 15-4. It's a bill that passed the House after being amended to reduce the tax. It's a bill that passed the House 31-9. Kevin McCabe, for example, voted for it in the House. Mike Cronk voted for it in the House. Sarah Vance voted for it in the House. It passes the House 31-9. It has, because it got amended in the House, it has to go back to the Senate. It passes the Senate the second time, 18-2. Rob Myers votes for it in the Senate the second time. So you have a tax bill finally. I mean, we can't. People say we can't pass any tax bills. We have a tax bill finally that passes the legislature by huge numbers. Comes up to the governor. What does the governor do? He vetoes it because it contains a tax, $1,200,000 tax. Talk about sending a message that this governor's not open to doing things that will improve the PFD. That was exactly it. Massive numbers in the Senate, the House, and the Senate again, and the governor vetoes it. So I just, I'm frustrated. I'm frustrated by this governor who talks about we've got to increase the PFD. We've got a bill that would help do that by reducing the leftover amount that needs to be taken out of the PFD, and yet the governor vetoes it.
All right, you ready? Here's the problem. Okay, so we're going to put up your dukes. Here we go. This is the put up your duke segment. So here's the problem. The portion of the bill that the governor had issue with was the tax on electronic smoking products, e-cigarettes, vapes, whatever you want to call it. Here is the problem. Vaping is used as a cessation tool for many people who smoke. Now, I've never really smoked, so I'm kind of an outlier on this deal, but many people, and I have many friends who have used vaping as a way to get away from burning tobacco products like cigarettes, etc. And in other countries, they have used this successfully as a cessation tool to help people stop smoking and to get healthier. This bill would have increased a significant component of on vaping products. But the biggest part to me was this. This is the comment from Gary Stevens. The tax portion of the bill was aimed at discouraging people from getting addicted. One of the things we've seen in tobacco taxation is that every time taxes are increased on tobacco, and they're including vaping products in that because there's nicotine, although nicotine is not tobacco, they're calling it tobacco. And they have been increased several times in Alaska, so people stop using it. Anytime we see a government trying to have behavior modification through taxation on people, that is an inappropriate use of power, first and foremost. Secondly, the bill, they're talking about putting a 45% wholesale tax on products, meaning they're going to tax if it costs a $10, it's going to be $14.50 by the time you're done. That's just for the cost to the supplier, and then your costs are going to go up. Not to mention the fact that, for example, the city of Anchorage has over a 50% tax on vaping products, and the Matsu Borough or Wasilla has another 40% on top of that. And the thing is, are we trying to make people healthy, or are we trying to drive people back to cigarettes, which have the lowest tax at $2 a pack when it's all said and done? And is this really about behavior modification, or is this just about people who are offended about people trying to make their lives better? And like you said, it's $1 million out of a $6+ billion budget. I'm not saying that we shouldn't find cuts and things, but taxing people and trying to modify their behavior through taxation is, in my opinion, immoral. It's none of your damn business what people do. Now, again, especially when you're talking about a 45% or a 25%, or the final bill was 35% wholesale price on vaping products. That makes no sense whatsoever. Why are we trying to hurt people who are trying to get to a healthier lifestyle? That's my question.
Well, every tax is going to have some downside. Every tax is going to have some pushback. And I don't disagree that this may have some impacts. But look, the Matsu has a tax on this. As you just pointed out, Anchorage has a tax on this. And it's not like this state in at least some of the localities haven't faced that issue and decided to go ahead with the tax in any event. The tax here would have equalized the tax on e-cigarettes, vaping products versus tobacco. They weren't penalizing e-cigarettes; they were just equalizing it to cigarettes. Vaping a heck of a lot better than I do, so I'm not gonna get into a vaping argument with you. But this was an opportunity again that passed the Senate the first time 15-4, passed the House 31-9, and passed the Senate again the second time 18-2. This was an opportunity finally to have some alternative revenues that would help reduce the dependency, reduce the impact on PFDs. And the governor vetoes it. The governor didn't veto it because he thought it was somehow an infringement on rights. What he said was, there were many conversations about what an appropriate level of tax would be, but ultimately a tax increase on the people of Alaska is not something I can support. That's not an argument about vaping. That's not saying it's an infringement on vapors' rights to have this tax. It's just saying I can't agree to any tax, and that's going to be the death of the PFD if we can't have alternative. If this governor is saying we can't have alternative revenues that help reduce the dependence that our state government has come to have on PFD cuts, if we can't have alternative revenues, if that's what this governor is saying, then we're in a world of hurt. We might as well just stop talking about the PFD because it's just going to keep being the revenue source that people go to. So we can't have a boxing match on the vaping issue because you'll just knock me out every time.
Well,
So
and
we can have a disagreement on whether or not the state needs alternative revenues and whether this was because of the massive votes behind it, whether this was a good opportunity to have alternative revenues.
And I think your justification, well, look, the Matsu has a tax and Anchorage has a tax, so it must be okay. And the majority of the legislature agreed, so it must be okay. The majority of the legislature has agreed to spend $16 billion over the last 6 years out of our savings. That doesn't make it okay. That's not a valid justification for a tax on people. Again, I would say probably arguably that the people who are smoking and who will go back to smoking are probably in the lower to median incomes as well. So they, again, will be disproportionately affected. So this is a doubling down on like the PFD taxation as well. And raising the smoking age from 18 to 21, we could still draft them. We could still send them in the military. They can still be tried as adults, but they can't choose they can't choose their own, choose their own poison at the end of the day. The whole thing to me was somebody's pet project. This was Peter Machicki's pet project and Gary Stevens' pet project to begin with. And I think that overall it's wrong because they may not agree with something. They're going to go ahead and utilize it. It's a sin tax. If you don't like it, I think it's a sin. It's a sin tax. You're going to pay. And again, look at what the National Health Service in England did over there. They made it available as a cessation tool all over and again, you don't want to argue on that. But the bottom line is, to me, it makes no sense in the long run when you've already got taxes on taxes on taxes. When you're talking about the things there'll be 100% tax almost at the wholesale level on a single product. Name me another single product that's got nearly 100% wholesale tax on it. You got a minute here to finish up.
Oh, almost the PFD. It's not 100% yet, but we're headed toward it. I mean, we are. What we're doing in this state is we're targeting taxes. We're singling out certain sources of revenue like the PFD, and we're singling out certain products like vaping to tax, to raise revenues. We're not broadly spreading the tax. And what does a broad tax do? It increases the denominator and lowers the take from everybody that you have to that you take from them. I mean, what the problem with the PFD is you're having to take $1 billion targeted against the PFD.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We didn't get it in number 3, but I'm sure we'll cover it here in a second. Brad, thanks for coming on board. As always, good to talk with you.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
All right, we got more coming up. Hour 2 dead ahead. Chris Story is going to be joining us. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. If you got to go, make sure you come back tomorrow. Be kind to one another, love one another, and live well. Hour 2 of Common Sense Radio is up next. Again, I just see this as a doubling down on taxation of people who are already being kicked as far as this goes. But
No, I disagree with that. This is not a doubling down. This is an alternative source. It's regressive. I don't disagree with that, but it's not as regressive as PFD cuts. And these things you have to look at relatively. Is it better than the regressivity you get out of PFD cuts? And yes, it is. It's regressive, but it's less regressive than PFD cuts. So I don't view it as doubling down. I view it as yes, targeting a given segment of the population, but so do PFD cuts. They target middle and lower income Alaska families. And the question is, which targeting is worse in terms of regressivity?
I don't even know where to go at this point. I'm so irritated by this whole thing because I've been looking to see what it's doing to businesses and everything else, and to the local folks and my friends who, one friend who smoked a pack a day and who's like, well, if this little bottle of juice that used to be $12 now costs $30, which is what's happening, then I guess I'll just go back to smoking cigarettes because that makes more sense and the tax is cheaper. I mean, it just, it makes no sense. This behavior modification through taxation is, again, I'll say it, it's immoral. I mean, to say, so, to try and control somebody through the taxation is an immoral thing. But I want you to get on to number 3, Brad, because you and I are not going to agree on this because again, I mean, look,
we're going to have this debate every time about every tax. Somebody's going to come on and say, "Oh, you can't tax that because it does X." Well, the problem is the alternative is just continuing to take PFD cuts, and PFD cuts have the largest adverse impact on Alaska families and the largest adverse impact on the overall economy of any of the alternatives.
I guess this is the question. Does the government really have a business? Is it really their business to try and decide to tax me and change my behavior? Is that their business?
Keep in mind, Michael, Dunleavy didn't veto this because of behavior modification.
I'm talking about the sponsors of the bill said they were doing it for behavior modification. They wanted people to be healthier and they want them to not be addicted. And so they're going to tax them. Is that the government's business?
You're gonna level me every time on that particular issue.
It's a taxation issue. Is it? I mean, again, I don't, and I'm not trying to beat you up, Brad. I'm just trying to say, and I agree with you that we have to find a way to try and fund outside of the PFD. What we should be doing is pushing back on all the spending to get down beyond the PFD, and that they shouldn't be taking it. But I mean, this whole thing right here, to me, it disproportionately affects people who are trying to get better. Who are trying
you and I have talked ourselves until we're blue in the face about the need to cut spending. I agree with you. We don't disagree. We don't disagree on that. But we've not succeeded. And why have we not succeeded? Because we're not engaging the top 20%. Yeah, maybe this tax doesn't engage the top 20% either. But it's some revenue, it's some step that the legislature by overwhelming votes approved. So yes, this particular tax has problems. Every tax is going to have problems. If not you, I'm going to be debating with somebody else over other taxes. The problem is if we don't do something of that nature, and we finally got this one through the legislature, if we don't do something of that nature, we're just going to continue down the road of PFD cuts.
I'm just looking at the chat room here. Funny how Michael doesn't like a tax, he opposes it, but let's do an income tax. I mean, look, I'm not in favor of an income tax. I said if we have to have it, it's probably the best one, the flat tax, but I'm not in favor of an income tax. I'm in favor of cutting the budget. That's what I've been talking about for years. Brad and I both talked about that for years. But if we have to have one, should it be a flat tax? That's the question. And I think what really irks me about this whole thing more than anything else is the blatant in-your-face parochialism and you poor, pitiful children, we have got to decide for you that you need to be healthier, and so we're going to tax you into behaving properly. And that really is one of the things that irritates me. And again, the many people that I know that will be affected by this and could shorten their lives because of it. It just irritates me. I guess that's the big thing.
Let me try it this way. I would have preferred another tax. I would have preferred a non-targeted. I would have preferred a broad-based tax. Even if it only raises $1.2 million, I would have preferred a broad-based tax to try to do that. But this is one that finally got through the legislature, and it got through the legislature by overwhelming numbers. And it just sort of, for the governor to just sort of spit back in their face, not on the vaping issue, not on the behavior modification issue, but because, quote, ultimately a tax increase on the people of Alaska is not something I can support. For the governor to spit back in their face on that, I think is just, I don't understand how we're supposed to solve this problem if we can't engage the top 20%, if we can't make everybody responsible, a broader base of people responsible for paying for government.
And I'm referring back to the article that you sent me. The bill also included a tax on electronic smoking products that contain nicotine, which is what Dunleavy took issue with. It's not in his quote, but apparently in his whole comment, he said that was the part that he had heartburn with. So
he didn't have a comment other than this letter. I mean, he doesn't comment on anything. That's Dunleavy.
Well, that's true too. I mean, that's true too. All right. Well, we don't have time now to get to number 3 because put up your dukes, man. All right. So we're gonna leave it there. I guess maybe we'll pick up the number 3 next week and have it as number 2 or number 1 or something. And we'll continue. Brad, Thank you so much for coming on board and sharing with us. I appreciate it.
Michael, this is great radio. And thank you for not blowing smoke in my face a second time.
I just thought that was funny. I just thought that would be it. And it wasn't literally in his face, folks. It was at the camera. Man, people are so sensitive these days. All right, Brad. Well, thank you so much for coming on board and joining us. We appreciate you being part of it today.
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
All right, folks, we got to go. We're going to jump back into it here. Please like and share this video. Like and follow the show page. Subscribe, ring the bell on YouTube, do all that stuff. Here we go. Hour 2 of the Michael Duke Show.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Across the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find the live stream and links to all our social media sites where we simulcast the radio show every morning on video. That's YouTube and Twitch and Facebook. You can find us out there. You could also, of course, find the podcast and more. And every day we broadcast live across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station, and or FM translator. Now, hour 2 of the big radio show, we just finished up with Brad Keithley with the weekly top 3. It should have been top 2 because Brad and I got a little argumentative there in the last segment because I disagreed with one of his assertions on this thing. But here we are, just finishing up. If you missed it, you can go back and listen to it on the podcast or on the replay on any of the social media streams, and we can talk about that as well. Chris Story is going to be joining us at the bottom of the, in the next segment. And he's going to go over the bottom of the hour, and we'll probably take him into the third segment as well. We're going to talk politics, and then we're going to talk, we're going to get our weekly life coaching lesson because that's how we roll around here. Meanwhile, in this segment, I guess I will. I guess I will take phone calls in this segment to talk about things because I guess I want to get your take on it. By the way, this hour of the program being brought to you by our friends at Satellite West, who have got all your communications needs covered, whether it is phones or texting or email or internet. They can do it all with the help of the satellite and the Iridium satellite network. They've got the tools and the technology to keep you connected anywhere in the state of Alaska. You can find them at satellitewest.com, and we want to say thank you to them for sponsoring the program. Here's the number to call this morning. My Alaska number is still broken. Thank you, GCI. I'm waiting. We're waiting on a part now. We're waiting on a part. I mean, you'd think they'd have a million of these in the warehouse, but I'm waiting on a part. So my direct line to my conference phone is 319-527-3864. 319-527-3864. And I guess that means I got to turn the dang thing on. I forgot to turn it on this morning because I wasn't going to do phone calls, but now I've decided to do phone calls because that's how we roll around here. Anyway, you can join us and give us your thoughts. Now, we were just talking about this bill. And quite honestly, again, every time I see the, every time I hear the justification of, well, so-and-so's taxing it, we should tax it too. Wasilla is taxing it. We should tax it too. Anchorage is taxing it. We should tax it too. And the majority of the legislature agreed, so the governor just should have let it go through. Well, I guess this is one of the few times that I'm going to go ahead and agree with the governor on this, because I think that this I think that this made absolutely no sense whatsoever. I guess first and foremost, because of the commentary from Gary Stevens in the beginning of the bill, is that the tax portion of the bill was aimed at discouraging people from getting addicted. That's again, behavior modification through taxation. If you've got legislators who are calling for that, they need to go, because that's not their job to modify your behavior. Willie is out in the Village, and he says Bethel's sin tax are 12% on alcohol, and it has an 80-cent per pound shipping charge from Anchorage. And then there's a 15% tax on weed products. Taxes have never slowed a person down on consumption, as far as I know, in his anecdotal information. That's what kills me. This whole thing is that you're, and especially, again, setting aside the facts that I'm really opposed to taxation in general, but the fact that they are adamantly attacking something that has been used as a cessation tool for example, in the UK, the Royal Health Service, the Royal Cancer Society has endorsed the idea of vaping as a cessation tool, and the National Health Service they're putting vaping supplies right inside the stores, right inside the pharmacies, so that people can go in there, and they have cut their smoking rate in England by over 50% in the last 5 years. And the Royal Cancer Society has found that it's 95% or more safer than smoking. Now, does that mean that it's completely harmless? No, but it's 95% safer than smoking. Why wouldn't you want people to be able to quit when they, got started early, they smoked, maybe you don't like whatever? Why would you do that? Why would you make the regulations and the taxation so onerous that people are basically left with the one option that's slowly killing them? I mean, and why would you be proud of that? I mean, somebody says it's way too personal for me because I vape. Put a much larger tax on ammo might be a good way to add revenue. I would be against taxation on ammo as well for the same reason, or further taxation on ammo, because already we get money into the Pittman Roberts Fund and all that other kind of stuff. I'm against taxation in general, but again, the idea that somehow this behavior modification is going to fix the issue, that by taxing them you'll modify their behavior. Tell me how prohibition worked out for you. Tell me how that one worked out for you. It's just, and I guess, if it had been a 5% tax or a 3% tax or an 8% tax, you may have been able to swallow it better. But when you're talking about a 45% wholesale tax at the state level, and then the various communities have got another 45 to 50% wholesale tax on top of it, I mean, you're doubling the product cost before it even gets to the consumer. Name me one other product that has 100% tax on it before the consumer even sees it. I mean, it's insane. But maybe I'm wrong. You tell me. 319-527-3864. 319-527-3864. And Brad named off some luminaries who voted for the bill. Rob Meyer voted for the bill. Kevin McCabe voted for the bill. So-and-so voted for the bill. I'll fight them too. I mean, I don't care. I mean, I'll fight with them too. This is not, it's not a solution. It's not a solution. But again, maybe that's just me. You'll have to tell me. 319-527-3864 is the phone number if you want to sound off on all that. The ADN is up to its old tricks again. They have they posted an article about Charlie Pierce as the outgoing mayor. Now, we covered this story yesterday because Must Read, man, they're all over this stuff. Must Read has got these stories like a day ahead of either KTUU or ADN. Suzanne Stowning is doing some good work over there. As long as you can read between the lines and get past the partisanship, it's an amazing thing. But they go on and on about the investigation into the supposed investigation about a borough employee making a credible harassment claim against, I had to laugh because the previous harassment claims that Charlie has faced was that he was he was bullying. He was bullying, illegal acts and allegations of bullying. Charlie Pierce is one of the most straightforward men I've ever met. And I think some people find that to be, when you're straightforward and strident, maybe they consider that to be a bully. Maybe somebody got their feelings hurt. I don't know. But just the tone of this whole story is just such a hit piece on really one of the only conservatives in the whole race. I find it. And the bottom line is, in the end, is that they're like, he's doing this. He declined to drop out so that Chris Kirka could take his place. That was the final parting comment on this whole deal. And I'm just like, you guys. All right, let's go over here and we'll take some calls and see what you guys have to say. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Oh, good morning, Mike. This is Mike here in Fairbanks, driving down Chino Pump. I'm a little discouraged at Brad wanting to tax this, and then he also brought in the PFD. I'm neither a smoker nor do I get the PFD, but I don't think it's fair that he should bring that up, that other cities have passed this tax. My friend out here, he was a terrible smoker, 3 packs a day. Now he vapes, and he says it's actually doing him a world of good by vaping as opposed to buying 3 packs of cigarettes a day. But I'm kind of tired of the taxing. Everything's tax, manufacturer's tax, producer's tax, consumer's tax. And I can't believe Brad Keithley he wants a tax. For years now, I've listened to him, and he, to me, sounds like he's a pro-tax kind of a guy.
That may be your takeaway on this. I think Brad has advocated that, yes, Brad and I have been doing this, he's been on this show for 7 years. And we've been talking from the very beginning about the need to cut the size and scope of state government, and why it's necessary. But a couple, 3-4 years ago, Brad started saying, look, they're not listening. They're not cutting. There is no political will to cut. So if there is going to be a tax, this is the kind of tax we should have. He was trying to mitigate the damage. And I think some people could take that away is that he's pro-tax. I think Brad is anti-tax. I think he is more limited, smaller government, but he's also a realist and understands, like many of us do, that until there is the political will to make those changes, we have to mitigate whatever damage is coming down the pike to make sure that we get the most. If it's going to be a tax, it should be the most appropriate form of tax. And I think that's what he's trying to push.
Well,
it's my opinion.
I understand that, but I think number one, cut the spending. And it's going to go back to the vote, Mike. People need to get off their butts and start voting for the right people, and not the people that promise everything and they get into office and they go exactly against the people's will. This state needs to vote better for better people. The people that are running this state are terrible, and they're running the state into the ground. I think the PFD should be a sacred cow. They shouldn't touch it. They should give the people their money, because that money goes all back into the state to help people out in small families, especially in time of this inflation. To me, I'm disgusted with taxes. I'm sick of them, and I'm sick of this government, Mike. But that's all I wanted to say, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you calling in and joining us this morning. Thanks for being part of the show. All right, let's go over here and take another call. Good morning. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Barbara. It's North Pole. How are you today?
Good morning, Barbara. What's on your mind?
Well, I got 2 things going on. You got to elect better people, right? So there's 2 campaign events that people in North Pole or Fairbanks might be interested in. One is up at Thursday evening at 7 o'clock in Fox Community Center. I'll be talking. And if you are in North Pole, then Friday night at the Hotel North Pole. I'll be there from 6 to 8, as well as a bunch of other borough candidates. So come on in, get to meet your borough candidates. If you want to, the tax cap is up. That's another tax that people are need to come out and support. So come on out and learn about the propositions and meet the borough candidates.
Okay, what's the date again?
One of them is Thursday at Fox Lions Community Center. That's on Thursday. And there's also a way to call in on that on Zoom if you look at my campaign page, Haney for SNSD on Facebook. I've got the graphic posted and with the Zoom information. And the other one is Friday night. That's just at the North Pole Hotel, and that's it from 6 to 8.
All right. Well, thank you, Barbara.
And if you're a senior, Ravens Landing from 4 to 6 at Ravens Landing.
4 to 6 on what day at Ravens Landing?
Friday.
All right. Well, thank you, Barbara. I appreciate you calling in and sounding off and letting us know about those events. We appreciate it. All right, folks, that brings us right up into the break. And so I guess we'll officially close the phone lines for now. And we will continue here in just a moment. The Michael Dukes Show continues. Your home for common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Back with more right after this.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Okay. Let me close this right here. Goodbye. We'll get that squared away there. And look at that. We got all of that done. Okay. So that is fixed. Let me get back over here to the chat room to see. Let's see. Did you seriously just suggest that all the... Wait a second. Oh, why can't I? There we go. Did you seriously just suggest that all the something good men and women who voted for this sin tax need to go? People you regularly have on your show. Are you serious? No, I suggest, Jessica or Jennifer, that you listen a little closer. I said Brad used them as objectives to say these people voted for it, so it should be okay. And I said I would fight them on that. I don't believe it was a good thing to vote for. Yes, I actually disagree with people who I have on the show. Shocking, I know. But no, that's not what I said. I did not say that we needed to go. I said I would fight them. You know. Wasn't there something about teens getting into vaping, something about trying to get that stopped because of the substance they were vaping? Might that get mixed up with something? I mean, that's a big push right now. It's all the teens. The teens are the ones who are the increase in, you know what? I could tell you all the kids who were smoking in high school. That was the other thing. Aaron said it earlier. Vaping also targets children disproportionately. An increase in tax to make it more difficult for kids to access. They're the most vulnerable to price increases. Yeah, I have never seen a kid who was smoking that didn't get a chance to get smokes, son. I mean, I hate to tell you that, but taxes on cigarettes never stopped a smoking kid from not getting smoking or from smoking dope or anything else. We all saw it in high school. I mean, I haven't been in high school in 40 years, but I still remember that. And it still goes on today. Absolutely still goes on today. So, yeah, the tax does not slow down the kid at all. The behavior pattern is already there. But, you know, it's all good. It's all good. All right. Brad Keithley is gone, and now we're bringing Chris Story on the line. Hello, my friend. How are you? Well, maybe if I could actually hear Chris, that would help. Let me see if I got this right there. Are you there, Chris? There we go.
Hey, Michael. Good morning.
How are you, my friend?
Excellent. You? I don't have to ask. Never mind. Don't tell me. Don't tell me how you are.
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. You ready to dive into all the political stuff and then give us the uplift, or you all ready to go?
Oh, okay, sure. And remind me.
We talked about this last week. You were going to give us your thoughts on the election and the ranked choice voting and everything else, and then we were going to do a uplift after that. Are we still on board for that, or do I need to only keep you for one here?
Well, let's see where it goes. I've had my head somewhere else this morning, so
yes,
I'll just follow your cue.
Did not realize that rectal defilade was an actual geographic location. Okay. I found it. There it is. All right. Well, good. You're all ready, and I'm all spun up. So this is exactly what we need to. This is exactly the kind of race we need to.
You're leading in this tango.
Yes, it's a tango. It's going to be a tangle. It's not going to be a tango. All right. Mission creep. Let's see. Government has too much mission creep, sticking their nose in too many places that are none of their business. That's government's. I mean, that is their nature, is it not? Is that not the nature of government? All right. We're going to continue on here, and we're going to jump into this with Chris Story here in just a second. And we're going to share some thoughts with him. It's going to be fantastic. You can't wait. So I guess we need to kill the phone number first, and then we will jump back in with Chris Story, the man from Homer. Robbie says, I was a smoker. Worst mistake I ever made. Finally quit, but it was difficult. Right. Wouldn't you like to have had some tools to be able to have access to that, could have made it better for you? No, maybe. All right, let's go. Here we go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. All right, welcome back, my friends. It is hour 2 of the Michael Duke Show, broadcasting live across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station and or FM translator. This hour of the show being brought to you by your friends at Satellite West. And it is Tuesday, so let's jump into it with one of our perennial, well, I guess weekly guests, not perennial. That's a little bit longer time frame. Chris Story. The man from Homer. He is a realtor. He is a soothsayer and a guru. He is a potter. Pottery, not the other. Anyway, Chris Story. Hello, my friend. How are you this morning? What's going on?
Good morning, Michael. I find myself on top of the world looking down and liking what I see.
You like looking down on on the world, don't you? That's right. Hey, my friend. Let's I invited you on last week, and luckily I reminded you here before we got started. I want to talk a little bit about the political nature of things. Now, that's not your normal shtick. Your normal shtick is more uplift and kind of making people's lives better. You have your own radio show which broadcasts on Tuesday and Thursday down on the peninsula on I think KPEN down there, and you talk about real estate, and you got a lot of different things, but politics is really not your normal. That doesn't take up the lion's share of your time. But I think you've got some good insights. You and I have had lots of conversations on and off the air about this over the years. But, now that we're post primary and everything else, and we're getting wound up here, we're only 7 weeks away today, 7 weeks today, in fact, from the general election. What's your take on things? What are your thoughts? Hit me with some of your thoughts here as you look at the candidates, as you look at the ranked choice voting system, as you look at how things have peeled apart. What are your thoughts?
Well, I would merge the two together and say I like two things. One, I like that over these years that you and I have known each other and become friends, I like that we don't agree on everything politically. In fact, I called you specifically last week to poke you about the permanent fund and said some things that got you it was like I went up to you and lit your hair on fire. And I love it. I love that we can debate, we can sit down and have lunch and discuss things that we don't agree upon. We can discuss it over the phone. A lot of times I'll bring up a subject to you very specifically that I want to know more about by asking a provocative question, because I know you're going to hit me over the head with how you think and what you think about it. So I like that about politics. I've always looked at politics. I've been paying attention since I was very young and watched every minute of the Iran-Contra hearings on televised Iran-Contra hearings. I loved every minute of that. I loved Ronald Reagan since I was a little kid and can remember watching his speeches and just, shh, quiet, president speaking. I loved him and I loved everything about it. So politics to me are part of what I consider a whole life. In other words, I'm engaged. I consider myself awake. I consider myself paying attention and yet able to disagree with people I like. I remember one time, very specifically on Facebook, not that social media is the bellwether of all things moral or right or conscious or awake, but I remember having a conversation back and forth with somebody who is Satan to my angel. You know, I mean, as far as politics are concerned, we couldn't be more opposite. This guy was as far left as you could possibly go in this world.
Right.
And he and I were having this little debate on Facebook, and somebody popped in, a really angry liberal person popped in and said, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're friends with Chris Story." And this particular person responded, "Yeah, we agree on nothing politically, but he's a good guy," or whatever. And we went back and forth like that. But I thought, isn't that interesting? In a whole life, politics is a slice of it. And yet we've sort of brought it back to, I kind of know which team you support and you know which team I support, which means we're obviously going to be adversarial. We're going to be negative towards each other. And I wish that we could debate our favorite candidates or tax or lack of a tax, or is the permanent fund socialism sort of in disguise the replacement of our mineral rights we don't enjoy even if we don't own property. I wish we could have that kind of conversation, discuss it, debate it, and then go to lunch and go discuss and enjoy each other's company outside of the disagreements we might have politically. Because I think politics is part of a whole life if you're awake.
I mean, I would agree. I mean, it is part of the life, and it is what kind of drives the system of governance and everything else. And we should be able to agree to disagree. We should be able to have a conversation. And in the end, even though we may have been on opposing sides, still be able to go break bread or have a beer or whatever it is that we want to do together. I've found that many times over the years, people that I've disagreed with, on philosophy or governance or politics, and we've been able to go find other points of interest that we do have common interests in. And that's the thing. That's what's really wrecking us these days. What's really wrecking us is, as you said, that person belongs to such and such party, or that person supports such and such a person or politician. Therefore, they are my enemy and they should be destroyed. They should be excoriated at every opportunity. We need to get the venomous pen out and drip the vial and bile all over them. And that's not how we're supposed to. I mean, first of all, what happened to the whole Socratic method of logic, rhetoric, and debate, right? I mean, logic, rhetoric, and reason. Why can't we have these debates logically and still find some common ground? I mean, what is stopping that these days? I mean, you and I are of the same accord, but on this, but why is it so hard to find people in any political persuasion who believes what we believe?
Well, or for example, can two things be true at the same time? And can we just acknowledge it on our side? Can we just acknowledge George W. Bush had a personal vendetta against Saddam Hussein and he just wanted nothing more than to take him out for having tried to take out his father 8 years prior? Of course, that's true. And did that have something to do with our invasion of Iraq? Of course it did. I can admit that, even though at the time I was a staunch supporter of George W. Bush at that time and the war efforts. And I can remember standing in the Sullivan Arena just before a big craft fair was about to start, and they announced over the loudspeaker we started the bombing in Afghanistan following 9/11, and there was just not a, you could hear a pin drop in that entire arena. And there was thousands of people in there, and they stopped still and listened to the announcement over the loudspeaker, and then there was an uproarious cheer, and America had united. And yet, at the same time, we can look back and go, two things can be true at once. He was wrong, and he was right. I'm speaking of George W. Bush, and just because he's got an R next to his name didn't make him a saint or perfect in every decision he made. Can two things be true about Lisa Murkowski? Can she be an Alaskan who loves Alaska and does the best she can? Yes. And she's a Democratic liberal in she is not a Republican. Can we just have an intellectual conversation about that? I remember one time I was walking the trail here on the Homer Spit, and a woman who would like to remain nameless, so I won't repeat her name, but she said to me, I said to her one day, I said, well, I saw you at the Republican debate the other night, and I thought that was interesting because, you're obviously a Democrat. Why don't you have your own candidate? Why don't the Democrats have a candidate running against Paul Seaton? And she said, well, because we have Paul. And okay, well, and I like Paul. Paul's a nice guy. I like him, and he does a lot of good for our community. He's a very nice person. A lot of volunteerism, even though he's out of office. But can two things be true about Paul? Can he at once be a Democrat who knows he needs to be a Republican to get elected, and can he be a nice guy? Can we just have an intellectual conversation with honesty about that? And I think that's a little bit what's missing. I remember you and I debated hotly over Ted Cruz and Donald Trump. And that was one of our last real political debates we had on air together while you were still on KBYR in Anchorage. And I was a staunch Donald Trump guy. I read every single one of his books. I loved him. I loved everything about it. Obviously, he's got some issues with, things, but I liked his business approach. I liked the way he thought. I knew he'd be an excellent president. And you were a Ted Cruz guy. We had this great debate, and yet we still remained friends. We still remained collegiate, and were able to converse with each other about many, many other topics, even though we disagreed hotly on that topic. And that's what I think is missing a little bit. I don't know if I'm answering your question or not, but I think what's missing is the ability to just be incredibly intellectually honest, and yet, admit that our emperor sometimes wears no clothes.
No, I mean, I agree. This folds back into my discussion about how politics is destroying our soul. That, again, this used to be kind of a behavior pattern that we saw on the left a lot of times, where if you're not with me, then, on everything, then you're absolutely against me on everything. And so you must be destroyed. You are the outlier. You are the they. And that used to be kind of a uniquely, liberal mindset. And unfortunately, today, I see it on both sides of the aisle. I see it in the veneration of Trump and all his policies and all the things he does. And if I point out the things that he did wrong or things that he was, that he broke his campaign promises on, I'm immediately attacked because of that. We need to be able to point out the foibles of our elected officials, whether we support them or not, and be able to talk about them. We need to be able to point out the falsehoods and other people's theories without attacking them. Without, you need to poke holes in an argument without attacking the person. And I think we've kind of lost that. And I think we're encouraged by the news media and others to jettison that kind of reasonable debate, that kind of reasonable logic. It must be, if you aren't for the things that I'm for, you are the enemy and you must die. I mean, that if you are on Facebook for 5 minutes, you can find those kind of arguments where people are, I can't tell you how many times my wife has come to me with a tear in her eye and said, I had this friend and all I did was express some kind of opinion on something and they immediately attack. And I'm like, unfriend them. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, if that's all they're going to do is attack you because you don't believe exactly like they believe, then, I mean, what good is that at that point?
And coming full circle to your opening question about ranked choice in the recent election, I don't know anybody, to be quite frank with you. In my circles, both political or familial, social, I don't know anyone who understands fully the process and or how it came about to being our new voting system. I really don't. So when you ask about, that, or you have a discussion or debate about these kinds of things politically now, we have this whole other element of it, which is none of us really have a frank understanding of how it came to be and or how it's going to be applied going forward. There's a lot of confusion. You mentioned people excoriating you for your opinions maybe on Donald Trump or other. Think about Sarah Palin recently.
Right.
I believe she is a patriot. I believe she's smarter than she was portrayed in the primaries where she joined John McCain. I don't think she's an idiot, and I don't think she's not capable. I believe she is capable of being a good representative.
Right.
But I also believe she left a long time ago. I think she followed the money. Don't blame her, but I think it's okay to admit she took a 11, 10, $12 million payday, left the state, became more or less a resident of Arizona, had a toehold here in Alaska. I think we should be able to talk about that and understand the only reason she's entering the political landscape again is because she sees a national window. She sees a seat in D.C. that could potentially bring her back to the national conversation. She isn't running for House District H out of whatever. She's not interested in going to Juneau. She's not really interested in Alaska politics. It's about self-serving. And can we bask in the glow of her national reputation and her conservatism if she's elected? Maybe. But why can't we discuss all those points without being, attacked for not just blindly supporting her, because
Right.
there are legions of fans. And so
Right.
I'd like to be able to have these kinds of conversations openly, publicly, and still remain, oh yeah, I like Michael Dukes. I know he said a few things critical of Sarah or questioned maybe her motives. Is it more ego than it is really serving Alaska? But why can't you hold that opinion and you and I just debate it or disagree on it and then continue on as neighbors and Alaskans?
Yeah. No, I mean, I agree. I think we need to be able to have the art of, somebody just said we've lost the art of listening, and I agree. I think that we need to be
What's
able to. Somebody in the chat room just said we've lost the. Yes, I know what you're saying. Shut up, story. All right.
Oh, I love it.
I wanted to get your take on ranked choice, but we're up against the break, and so I don't know if you want to start off with that, or we can pick that up later, whatever you want to do. But we do have to go to break. Chris Story is our guest. He is down in Homer. We're going to be back with him here in just a moment. The Michael Dukes Show. I can't believe he caught me with that one. Wasn't even paying attention, right? We're going to be back. Chris Story, our guest. The Michael Dukes Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. We return to more right after this.
Our light, our guide, and our trusted friend. Michael Dukes Show.
All right, Chris Story's in the chat room with us. We might as well just hit the ranked choice voting thing here in the break, and if they want to go back and listen to it on the podcast, they can. What's your thoughts? I mean, now that you've gone through it and you've seen and you've talked to people and you got the community down there, what's your take on the whole ranked choice thing now that it's happened and taken place, Chris?
I'm still confused. I'm still thinking, wait a minute, at some point this is going to be moved to the general election. Here's what I don't like. I don't like that most of us don't know how it came to be. Unless you're hearing something different, Michael, maybe I'm just living in my own echo chamber. I'm not talking to people that are thrilled by it. Maybe the jungle primary, maybe, hey, you had Democrats that would be registering as Republicans just to be able to jump into their into the primary, et cetera. I don't know. Maybe that's better. Maybe it should be, but I don't see how it serves us to have 48 choices on the ballot. And I don't know. To me, I find more confusion. I don't think it's helping. I don't think ultimately it's going to be looked back at history as having been a good idea. I think it was an experiment that was foisted upon us for other motives. And as you and I discussed on my show last week, the dark money was the big scare tactic that maybe drove people to vote yes for it out of, I think, complete confusion.
Yeah.
It should be recalled.
No, I mean, you ask how we got it. Well, we got it from outside influence. I mean, outside influence groups poured $7 million into this state to promote ranked choice voting, and they didn't promote it on the merits of the ranked choice portion of it at all. They pushed it as the elimination of dark money. In fact, the few people that I have talked to over the last 2 years who were what I consider to be conservatives and, pretty smart people. And when we got talking about it and they said, yes, they voted for it. And I said, why? Why did you vote for it? Well, because it got rid of dark money. That was the messaging. 90% of the messaging was the elimination of dark money. There was only 10% maybe that talked at all about the ranked choice voting component of it, which to me was the biggest issue. I mean, that was, 25, 26, 27 pages in the voter pamphlet on the changes that it was going to wrought on the election system. And nobody bothered to read those. So, I mean, it's just, it is. It's crazy how we ended up here, and I agree with you. I think it needs to be repealed. I think we need to get back to one person, one vote, and if we have to have a runoff, we have to have a runoff. That should just be the way it is. But it's the whole thing. It was the disingenuousness, especially after the Project Veritas people came out and basically said what we were all saying. I mean, we were saying it to ourselves. They just said it out loud when they had the Murkowski people on camera, basically saying we did this for Lisa Murkowski. We pitched it as dark money because we knew that that's what would sell to Alaskans. And we just hope that that doesn't come out to the campaigns, that they know that it was dark money. This is all about getting Lisa elected. I mean, these were all political operatives who'd worked for or with Lisa in the past. I mean, Scott Kendall, et cetera. And for her and for Bill Walker, that's what the whole point of this whole thing was. That was the only way they knew that Lisa would never survive a primary again, and that she would have to mount another write-in campaign. And maybe this one wouldn't be so successful. So,
like that free gas giveaway, she refused to talk to the Project Veritas reporter. I mean, it was so obvious she was trying to. I mean, just sit down and talk about it. Lisa.
Yeah.
Just sit down and talk about it. But I don't think we'll get any real answers out of that campaign. Yeah, she is at once, as I said, a daughter of Alaska and probably very pro-Alaskan and really truly does love the state and is power hungry and is never going to want to give up that seat and does believe it's hers by birthright and wants to retain it at any and all costs.
I mean,
can't those things both be true?
Right. I agree. I think they both can be true. I mean, have you reached out to the Murkowski campaign to have her on your program?
No, and they've never reached out to me. I don't think they're interested in discussing anything with people.
I've reached out. I've reached out to that campaign. I haven't had her on the program in years because the last time I had her on, I don't think she liked the questions that I asked. But I haven't had her on the program in years, and I've reached out to her and heard absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. I mean, there's just no interest in communicating with the people of Alaska except from the elevated stage or from digital, YouTube videos or radio ads or television ads. They just don't seem to want to engage with people who may ask the hard questions. I mean, it was the same problem with Don Young. He did not want to talk to me after I called him on the carpet for supporting unconstitutional laws, things that were blatantly unconstitutional on their face. And he had the audacity to tell me, well, that wasn't his job. His job was to pass the law, not decide if it was constitutional or not. And then why did you swear an oath to the Constitution? Did I think Don had the best interest of Alaska in his mind? Yes. Did I think he was the best man for the job? No. Because of that kind of mentality. That made no sense to me whatsoever. So you're right. Two things can be true. Two opposing or seemingly opposing things can be true at the same time. It just doesn't make sense. All right. We are about 25 seconds out, so we're going to put Chris back on hold, and we're going to come back to him here in just a second. And we're going to continue. I suppose I should pull that down, shouldn't I? We're going to continue here in just a hot second with Chris Story, the man from Homer. Please like and share this video. Like and follow the show page. Let's get to it. Here we go. Our uplift is next. Chris Story, the man from Homer, joins us every Tuesday. Today is no different, but we kept him for 2 segments. We did some politicking in the beginning, and it was politicking, but in a Chris Story way. Kind of touchy-feely, It's just kind of how he is. But good stuff. Good stuff. And I'm looking forward to continuing this conversation. But let's let's talk a little bit of uplift. What are we talking about this week, Chris? What is your topic for today?
How to get what you don't want.
You've got what I don't want.
How to get what you don't want.
Oh, how to
get it.
I was just going to say, you have what I don't want. Okay, thanks. See you later. All right. How to get what I don't want. Okay, so I guess first and foremost, that raises the question, why would I want what I don't want? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Exactly. No, that is exactly the question. Why would you do what it appears is heading you towards what you say you do not want? And I was thinking about, talking to you this morning, and I was reading in my libraries. I am every morning, and I just I randomly grabbed 3 different books, one by Zig Ziglar, one by Wayne Dyer, and another one by Robert G. Allen. And in all 3, I randomly opened to chapters just to reread or kind of sift through some thoughts, because I'm also writing a piece that I wanted some inspirational material for. And I kept coming across in each book randomly, and I'm telling you, this was weird because the through line was as though I planned it. I kept running across the quote, "As you think, so shall you be." And obviously this is biblically based. James Allen wrote a little book on it in 1910 called As a Man Thinketh. It's an incredible idea that as you think, so shall you be. So the question then follows, how are you thinking? And if you're thinking in a negative vein towards almost everything that you think about, you're going to get what? Negative feedback. You're going to get what you focus on. So I started thinking, well, how do you get what you don't want in life? And how do some people just repeatedly fall into a hole that they had to see coming? How did you not see the negative result that would yield from your negative thinking or behavior, or this sort of negative feedback loop that you get stuck in?
Right.
Well, it's when you focus on what you don't want, you tend to get it. And that's incredibly simple, but it's true.
And we've all met that person, right? The human Eeyore, who's like, I don't know why this always happens to me. I don't know why my car always breaks and my wife always leaves me and my dog always dies. It's just, that's my lot in life. And that's, right? Like you said, the people who are constantly, that's what they're focusing on. That's what they're attracting. The James Allen book, As a Man Thinketh, you and I occasionally do, we recommend books to listeners, and that has always been the book that I have recommended to anybody who wants a quick little read on making their life better. To me, that book was life changing. I carried a copy of that book around in my back pocket for about 5 years until the book absolutely fell apart. And anytime I had 5 minutes and I was sitting and waiting for something, I would sit there and read it. This is before you could listen to audiobooks on your cell phone, apparently. But that's what I was doing. I was reading that little book until I absolutely wore it out, and it changed my life, because as you think, so shall you be. That's a principle that is as old as philosophy itself.
And it's not just that we know that person. I will tell you and confess right here, I am that person at times. I am that person that will suddenly find everywhere I'm going, there's a hurdle. Oh yeah, here's a hurdle. Here's a hurdle. Wait a minute. It's me. And so I have to reshift my focus and think in terms of, okay, hold on. If I'm having a problem at every turn of life, 360 degrees around this particular whole life, could it be me? And what I'm thinking, I have to shift my focus. As I mentioned, I was sifting through 3 books this morning, just looking for some inspirational material for this piece I'm writing. And it's like, I'm constantly tuning and sharpening the saw of positivity, of optimism, of looking at the brighter side, looking at what else could this mean, because I can, just like any of us, fall into the trap of that negative feedback loop of looking at what I don't want. And suddenly, like my friend John Calhoun used to always say, because he was a race car driver at one point in his life, and he'd say, if you focus on the wall, you're going to hit it. If you focus on where you want to go, that's where the car will go. And that's common sense. It's simplistic, but it's true. If you focus on what you do not want, you're bound to get it. Occasionally, you can swerve around it at the last second. But why spend our life focused on what we don't want? Why spend so much of our time in a negative space where you've relived a negative response or a negative outcome over and over and over again? Maybe you get it. Maybe you don't. But if you've already lived through that negativity for months or years, you've already lost before it's even started.
Right.
You've lost necessarily. Don't focus on what you do not want.
You just hit me with the whole race car driver thing, because I remember driving when I was first learning how to drive. I remember my dad or somebody was basically saying, it says, watch out for the mailboxes, but don't look at them. Don't focus on them, because then you'll hit them. And it was true, because if you're looking at the mailboxes, worried about hitting them, I think that's a great example, because that's, you're desperately trying to avoid it, but it's consuming all of your thought. And so therefore you have a much greater likelihood of smashing the mirror on it on the way by, versus looking down the road at the middle line of where you want to go. And that's what you're focusing on. That's a perfect example, because I do remember that from the driving lessons. Don't focus on the mail, because we lived in a rural area that had mailboxes all over the road. Don't focus on the mailboxes, focus on the yellow line in the center of the road and go down, focus on that. So focus on where you want to go, not on the peripherals and the things that get you sidetracked.
I talked to somebody a couple of weeks ago, and they made a financial decision, not based on what was happening in their life, not based on what was happening in reality, but they very clearly said, because I asked a few questions, they clearly stated they were making this decision based on the economy. And I thought to myself, they're going to get the results of not manifesting more wealth or abundance simply because they saw the economy as completely out of their control. Thus, they're not making this investment. They will not reap the rewards later. They will have brought it full circle, because the economy, which is scary, it's out of your control. There's nothing you can do about the economy. They took what was within their control and diminished their own capacity as a result of something they felt was out of their control. They are they're getting what they don't want, which is a negative outcome of a bad economy, which means lack versus abundance.
Well, and that's the irony, right? I mean, because the economy is based on the faith of the people collectively, right? That's really what the economy is about. It's based on the faith of, what do they save their money? Do they spend their money? Do they invest their money? Do they squander it? I mean, that's what the economy is all about. I mean, economics are really all about the faith of the people in the system. And so if you look at it and go, oh, I'm not going to do it now, well, then you're going to reap in the end what you're reaching in on there. Not to say that you take wild stabs in the dark, but if you've got a good solid plan, now is the time to do it. Not worry about what the economy is going to do this year or next year, but 10 or 15 years from now.
And also, what's within your control is your economy, and the decisions you make for you and your family, your own economic well-being, are directly within your control. So if you're allowing fear or negativity of what you don't want, or things that you're worried that might occur, you're going to bring it directly to your economy versus letting go of the economy. You can't control the economy, but you can control yours. I love telling a story. We don't have time for it, but I need to share it again at some point in the near future about a family who created wealth at their kitchen table in the worst of times, because it can happen, and it can happen for you. Unless you just let the economy happen to you.
All right. So how to get what you don't want? Focus on the things that you don't want. That's how you get it. Focus on the things that's right. Focus on the things that you do want. Change your mind. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Make it work. Chris Story, my friend, thank you so much for coming on board.
My pleasure, Michael. Thanks for having me.
Folks, we're out of time. The Michael Duke Show continues tomorrow. Justin Ruffridge from the Peninsula and Mike Shower will be our guests. We will see you then, folks. Have a great day. All right, my friends, we're out of time for today. Thank you for coming on board. Again, please don't forget to go over to YouTube and like and subscribe over there. In case you didn't get notifications this morning on Facebook, apparently a lot of you didn't get those notifications this morning. Well, you can fix that by simply going over to YouTube and hitting the subscribe button and ringing the bell for notifications, or going over to Twitch and doing the same thing and following. So there you go. We will see you tomorrow, my friends. Be kind, love one another, live well.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.